genre. So I just have so much admiration and respect for this lady. To talk about some of the new studies of productivity and some of the new science on it, could you please welcome our second last speaker, Liz Faenza. Thanks, Liz. Welcome.
How you going, guys? I want to start by asking you a question. Have you ever wondered if the way you woke up in the morning actually had an impact on your whole day? Has that crossed your mind? How some days you wake up energised and positive, you bound out of bed, on the way to work, all the traffic lights go your way, you get the perfect parking spot and you get into the office and the boss offers you a promotion. Maybe that's not happened lately, but on the flip side, have you ever woken up feeling under the weather, mouth tasting like the inside of a bird cage, you've slept through your alarm, you'd struggle outside dressing as you go because you've got a really important presentation and you can't afford to be late, but when you get in your car, guess what? Your battery's flat. There's an hour wait for the NRMA. And then when you finally do get to work and you've psyched yourself up, you get into the office and they tell you, well, hey, that presentation's been done by your office nemesis, Evelyn. Ever wondered if how you woke up in the morning actually created the events of your day? That somehow what was inside you was affecting your outside? Well, I've been wondering about this stuff my whole life, and up until recently, there's really been no science to provide any answers. But lately, that's changed. Now, I want you to just hold that thought for a minute. I want you to imagine something. Imagine a world where we're not time poor, where we manage our day by managing our moods, where we live life congruently and on purpose, where the workplace is not just a 9-to-5 job, it gives us a deeper sense of meaning for who we are and our place on the planet, and where that extends out into the way that we actually use resources, so that we use them with care and awareness for the longer term. Sound interesting? Well, today what I'm going to do is share with you the science around this. You're going to learn that there are 4 energy modes to productivity and 5 key principles to managing your energy in the workplace. You're going to learn that emotion is actually just energy and that we all have it, which is pretty cool. So, here's where we find ourselves right now, hey? We all struggle with balancing energy, don't we? We struggle with balancing our time. We're time poor, often guilt-ridden, and feeling like, all of those standards that we're told about are just unattainable. For example, how many of you are single women in the room? Yeah? Excellent, and all looking pretty fabulous, hey? How much stuff are you told every day about how you should be? You're meant to be a party girl and have a wardrobe to rival Sex and the City, but at the same time, you've got to be on a career path and be financially responsible, plan for the future. Experts are always giving you statistics. They tell you you're really lucky to have a guy, and if you've got one, well, he's not the one you're going to settle down with in 10 years' time. And then they say, hey, we've got some really good news. Do you know genetically and statistically you're all getting more beautiful? How cool is that? And then they tell you you're competing for uglier and uglier men. If you're a woman of my generation, you probably feel like you need to be a superwoman at work, hey? You need to be a chef and dietitian in the kitchen. You need to be a Victoria's Secret lingerie model in the bedroom. And you're juggling 1,000 things a day. You've got to do them all well and on time. If you've got kids, you've got to be an attentive parent. And if you've got ageing parents like me, you've also got to be a good daughter. And you know what? You're not even allowed to succumb to the middle-age spread at our age anymore. You've got to somehow live up to the images of airbrush supermodels who literally haven't had lives yet. Now, fellas, you're not getting away scot-free, okay? I picked on the women. It's your turn now. If you're a single guy, you're meant to be on a fabulous career path, have a string of investment properties and play the stock market in your spare time. You're meant to know about things like wine and how to cook and be really well groomed, but you've still got to be a real bloke. And you know what? Those same researchers are saying stuff to you all the time too. They're telling you if you're not settled down by 30, you've simply got commitment issues. Family men, it's your turn. It used to be enough to be a faithful husband and a really good provider, wasn't it? They were the standards. But it's changed because now you've got to do really important things like put the toilet seat down and flush the loo. You've got to make sure that you've got approval for that poker game about 3 weeks ahead in triplicate, and then on the last moment your partner's going to say she wants to come too. Life has changed so much that even now the retirees can't rely on a pension anymore. If you're looking down the gun at retirement, you've probably figured out due to the GFC that you haven't got enough money to retire on, hey? And you're probably going to have to keep working longer, maybe until you're about 90, and then just die quickly. And you know that 30-year-old son that has commitment issues? He's not leaving home. He's got it far too good at your place. So what's going on? We've got more stuff and we've got more choice than ever. Our houses are full of stuff, and yet we're unhappier than we've ever been. We've divided time up into smaller and smaller and smaller units, and yet we seem to have less time for living than ever. Something's going wrong, isn't it? There's something that we're actually not managing. So it's no wonder that all of this leads to a sense of confusion and frustration and exhaustion. And those feelings can roll on into our relationships, into our workplaces, leaving us feeling drained of money, drained of time, drained of energy. And in thinking about this drained feeling, when I was doing my research, I actually imagined something really simple and obvious, a bucket with holes in it. You know, that drained feeling. And I realised that managing energy in our bodies, managing energy in our relationships and in the workplace is a bit like managing energy in a bucket. Now, around about this time, I came across some really interesting science. And it was talking about how our emotional energy has an impact on our relationships and how we feel about each other. Now, I tracked down the original research and it led me on a very interesting journey. You see, there are some scientists who spend their lives trying to figure out what consciousness is and how energy turns into stuff. And one of the beginnings of this whole scientific field called noetic sciences was back in the period of the Cold War. You'd remember that, some of you. Now, during that time, I remember it, I was there. During that time, the US and the Soviets were trying to figure out if they could use psychic powers to spy or as weapons. Sounds pretty cool. It's like a lot of the movies you've seen around the place. But while they experimented on people with paranormal abilities, they never actually figured out how they did this stuff. But fast forward 20 to 30 years and the advent of what we call quantum biology, we're actually starting to get an idea of what this is. And it turns out that it's energy. And what's more, every single one of us have it. Now, one of the foremost of these scientists is a guy called Dr. Vladimir Poponin. Now, Poponin wrote a paper back in 1995 called the DNA phantom effect. And what he was trying to do was figure out why, when someone loses an arm or a leg, they still feel as if the arm or leg is actually there. Now, what his team did is they decided to set up an experiment where they measured light particles in a vacuum. Light particles are the only thing that's left in a vacuum after everything else is sucked out. And they wanted to see if they could get things to affect the pattern of the light in the vacuum. So what they started by doing was introduce something human into the experiment. Now, don't get worried, they didn't throw a colleague's leg into the vacuum to see what happened. They actually used the smallest part of us, our human DNA molecule. They placed the DNA inside the vacuum. And they mapped the position of the photons, the light particles, before, during and after the experiment. And this is what happened. The light particles lined up and organised themselves in alignment with the DNA. Now, when they took the DNA out of the vacuum, that alignment stayed, sometimes for up to 1 month. Isn't that freaky? Isn't that weird, like your DNA doing that? So what could that mean? It could mean that you and I in this room right now are creating the reality that's around us together. It means that what's on the inside of us is actually having an effect on the outside of us. Now, how did the DNA do it? Electromagnetic energy. So, this dovetails perfectly with a second study, which was done by a group of army researchers on army recruit volunteers. I know it sounds a bit suspect, but what they were actually trying to do was to see the effect of emotions on DNA. So they got the army recruits to volunteer some white cells. They put those in petri dishes. They stuck them in chambers in another room. Then they did the most horrible thing to these 18-year-old army recruits. They sat them in a room and they made them watch movies. I know, what 18-year-old wants to watch a movie, hey? So they got them to watch movies that were designed to elicit different emotions: joy, anger, sadness, fear, stress, arousal. And they monitored their emotional peaks and valleys. And at the same time, they monitored the emotional peaks and valleys, the electrical output of the DNA that was separated from the recruits. And guess what happened? They matched exactly and simultaneously. Exact same response at exact same time. How amazing is that? Now, the researchers wanted to see how far apart they could separate the DNA samples from the army recruits and still get the same result. They separated them by 350 miles, and they still got the same result. Instantaneous, simultaneous, identical every single time. So let's recap. In the first study, a group of scientists discovered that our DNA has an effect on energy. In the second study, a different group of scientists discovered that our emotions have an effect on DNA, which leads me to the third study. This was done by another research team at the Institute of Heart Math. Now, what they did is they took 28 vials of DNA and they gave them to 28 researchers. And each of these researchers had been trained to focus their emotional energy and create emotional responses on demand. First of all, what they did is they asked the researchers to feel emotions like love, joy, gratitude, and appreciation. And they measured the DNA, and what they saw the DNA do was the DNA uncurled and the DNA switched on, so codes actually switched on. Then they said to the researchers, now feel emotions like anger, fear, frustration, and stress. So they did that, and they measured the DNA, and what did they find? The DNA shrank and switched off. Now they wanted to see if they could reverse that, so they said, right, now feel love, joy, appreciation, gratitude. And when the researchers felt those emotions, the DNA uncurled and the codes switched back on. This means something pretty important, doesn't it? Are you joining the dots to this? It's quite amazing because it means that if we're in fearful workplaces that are stressed and angry and anxious, our DNA shuts down. We're no longer clever people. We no longer have all of our genius and all of our skills and all of our abilities at our fingertips. And what's more, they found in further studies that there's a magnification effect when more people feel emotions, or if one person can feel them extremely strongly, they can affect an entire workplace. Now, in thinking about this, I realised that there's actually a DNA feedback loop. Because what we've all felt intuitively about the effect of our emotions and attitudes on each other is actually a fact. And it goes something like this. We've all got feelings, hey? We might have 10 different feelings in a day. Those feelings create emotions. Emotions are stronger than just a feeling. It's a stronger, more sustained response. Those emotions have an effect on switching our DNA on or off. The DNA then sends out an energy state, an electromagnetic field, that then reinforces our feelings or affects the feelings and energy of others. Now, the thing is, this has a ripple effect. It doesn't just stop with us, it ripples out to the people around us, and they're all doing it too. So imagine that just the ripples of energy in this room, hopefully they're good ripples. Are they feeling like good ripples? Yeah, you've had a great day, you've been feeding your mind. Now, as I started to think about this, I thought, if I think about any more science, I'm going to get a headache. So I started to think about the bucket again, that simple idea we had earlier on. And I realised that managing our energy might be a bit like managing the bucket. And I thought about what are the parameters for managing something in a bucket. And basically there are two. How much energy is in the bucket? Is your bucket empty? I think there's a song, Holding My Bucket, Dear Liza, Dear Liza. Do some of you remember that? Or is my energy in the bucket high, or is it somewhere in between? The other parameter is about the emotional charge of that energy. Is it charged by the negative emotions of anger, fear, and frustration, or is it charged by the positive emotions and attitudes of love, appreciation, and gratitude? Now, when you look at this, you can see that there are basically 4 quadrants, and each of these quadrants represent a different kind of state. They represent a different kind of energy and a different kind of charge. And what I want to do is just very quickly run you through these. The first one is all about when our energy is low. We've all been there, haven't we? And when our energy is low and we've got a bad attitude, we don't want to be around other people at all. We really retreat inside ourselves. We switch off, and now we know why. We become introspective, and we really need to do 2 things: lift our energy and change our attitude. The second of the low energy states is a bit different. Bucket's empty, but we've got this great sense of a positive attitude. What we might need to do is just go to a conference, get some extra training, get some inspiration and motivation, or have a holiday and a break from work, just to get our energy levels back up. The third of these states, the deconstructive state, is a high energy state, but it's charged with those negative emotions of anger, fear, and frustration. In this state, you actually can influence a lot of people. Someone who's high energy and in a bad mood can make everyone's day rotten. We've all experienced it, haven't we? But there is a good side to this. If you can manage someone in this state, they actually are very, very good at finding what's wrong. They can take things apart and they can help you to figure out what might need cutting or ending. Lastly, there's a constructive energy state. This is a high energy state with a really positive attitude. This is where people naturally gravitate to you because you're so full of positivity and energy. You can get a lot done, but you do need to be really well managed because you can't stay in this state forever. You will burn out. Every one of these states has a role to play and we cycle through them. And it's about knowing how to manage people and manage ourselves as we move through these states. And there are 5 key principles to doing this. And what I want to do today is illustrate that by using a case study. Earlier this year, I was asked to consult for a major bank in a couple of its regional branches that were really struggling with low productivity and high absenteeism. To give you some background to the one branch I'm going to talk about today, a year earlier, the bank had spent a fortune on completely renovating the branch. It was actually a physically sick workplace, and they thought that was the reasons for the low productivity and the high absenteeism. But 12 months later, nothing had changed. There was still low productivity. People were still sick all the time. So what I did is I went into the branch and I assessed their energy. I literally did an energy and attitude audit. The first thing I did was I talked to the staff about how they felt about their energy levels. Asked them what they did, what they ate, how they exercised, rested, and basically how they felt during the day at work too. And I was able to plot the 11 members of the branch like this. 8 of the branch members had low energy, while 3 had high energy. So the next thing I wanted to find out is what was their attitude? What flavour was that energy? And what I found when I talked to them and actually observed them in the branch was that of the 8 that had low energy, 7 had a negative attitude. And of the 3 with high energy, 2 had a negative attitude. So it was pretty easy to tell that something was definitely going on here. I needed to look at the branch's productivity for myself to see what the energy out was. This is the sum total of what they were doing in the workplace. So we looked at things like transaction processing times, we looked at customer feedback forms, and we looked at the key performance indicators of the business compared to other branches of a similar size and a similar demographic. And we mapped that on the energy mode map, and this is what it looked like. You guessed it. Low energy, negatively charged. It was all sitting down in that lower quadrant. So it was actually the perfect opportunity to do something about the branch. I had a chat to the branch manager and we created a plan of action and we began with some workshops. So the first thing I did in the workshops was I taught each of the staff members that their productivity was an outcome of their energy, and that they were responsible for the energy they brought with them into the workplace. Literally, I introduced them to the bucket idea. And I said, hey, what's in your bucket when you come to work is all you've got to generate business and earn your wage. We then talked about the importance of attitude, the emotional charge of that energy, and talking about DNA and how that is broadcasting out to other workers, making some people on the edge feel worse and affecting their customers. The next thing that we did is we talked about the outcomes for the business, and we showed them the mode map and how all of the sum total of their individual buckets was creating this low performing productivity. And then we sat down and we created a branch vision. So I got them to workshop how they wanted the branch to feel for them and for their customers. And they created this branch vision and they put it up in the common room as a reminder to what they'd made a commitment to do. Now, a month later, I went back into the branch to see what was going on, and I was flabbergasted by the transformation that occurred. Let me show you what had happened. Remember when the productivity of the individuals looked like this? Well, when I went back and I re-interviewed them and did all the things I did the first time round, but now there was a change. It all shifted up into the constructive mode with a couple people still needing just a little bit more energy. There's a major transformation. So I said to the manager, well, what did you guys do? I didn't expect that just the introduction of this model would make such a big impact. And he said, well, you know, funny thing is, everyone got really excited about the importance of managing their own energy. They actually got it. So he thought about how he could support that as a manager. He went out and actually bought buckets. I mean, that's how literal it was. And he bought a big bucket and he stuck it in the common room. And they put in fruit and fresh water and nice snacks so that any time someone felt low in energy, they could go to a good energy source and keep their energy up. And then the next thing he did is he went and bought individual buckets for his staff. It was really cute. Put one on each of their desks. And then what the staff were doing is they were making a personal commitment writing on post-it notes what they would do to keep their energy levels up, their commitment to exercise and rest, their commitment to what they were eating and what energy they brought into the workplace, and also about their emotional charge, their attitude. And at the end of the week, they pulled all of those things into a big bucket and they had a bucket meeting. They pulled them all out and they said, all right, this is my commitment and this is my idea for the branch. And they'd kept this going just for a month. And when I looked at the KPIs, when I looked at the customer feedback forms, and when I looked at their transaction processing time, it actually put them in the top 25% of branches, down from the bottom. A very big change, and in such a short time. Because basically, each individual took responsibility for their energy. And the manager took responsibility for moving people through the modes as they experienced them. Whether they should be thinking about a task, taking a break from a task, analysing it, or just getting on with it. Now, there is so much more I could have shared with you on the science and on the model. And of course, we've only got limited time today, but I really invite you to get a copy of our book. It's available free from the Bucket Revolution table, and just get familiar with the depth that's behind all of this. I'd really like to finish just with an invitation for you to take the ideas and the concepts in the book and in this presentation and figure out how you can boost your energy and shift your attitude and manage it. I'd also like to invite you to visit our website and use the online tools to help you in your workplace. And for some of you, this is a bigger invitation. It's an invitation to take these ideas beyond your homes, beyond your workplaces, into the way we use resources in our community, because it's all just energy. Because emotions do matter. Energy is really important. And at the end of the day, our attitude has an impact on everyone around us. So I want to leave you with an invitation to see how that can affect and impact on the biggest bucket we have, this planet of ours. An invitation to start your very own bucket revolution. Thank you.
Gorgeous. I don't think it's too